Your pension covers the stuff anyway. That was what my son-in-law Brandon said at table 12, loud enough for the waiter to hear and soft enough for him to pretend it was a joke. I was sitting at the far end of a white tablecloth restaurant in Hartford, Connecticut, with a glass of ice water sweating beside my untouched salmon and my daughter Melissa laughing like he had said something charming. The bill had not even come yet. Brandon had already ordered the ribeye, 2 appetizers, and a bottle of wine that cost more than my monthly electric bill. Melissa had leaned back at her chair with that smooth, polished smile she used around other people, the one that made strangers think she was devoted. "Mom doesn't mind," she said, touching my wrist like I was a child. "She always wants to help." I looked at her hand on mine. Perfect nails. Gold bracelet. The bracelet had shown up on my bank statement 3 weeks earlier under a boutique name I did not recognize. $286. When I asked her about it, she told me I had probably forgotten buying Sophie a birthday gift. Sophie's birthday was in November. This was April. I did not argue then. I just wrote it down. That was what they never understood about quiet women. Silence is not always confusion. Sometimes it is evidence gathering. My name is Eleanor Whitaker. I am 71 years old, and for 38 years I worked as a school nurse, patching scraped knees, checking fevers, calling parents, and keeping other people's children safe until the final bell rang. My pension was not a fortune. It was the last steady thing in my life after my husband Richard died. It paid for my small house, my prescriptions, my groceries, and the little bit of dignity I still believed a woman earned after decades of doing things the right way. But that night, sitting across from my daughter and the man who had taught her to call theft help, I realized they had stopped seeing it as my money. Maybe they had stopped seeing me as a person, too. The waiter came with the leather check folder. Brandon did not even look at the total. He slid out his card with 2 fingers and gave the kind of smile men give when they think money makes them taller. Melissa was telling their friends how stressful it had been managing Mom's finances, as if I were not sitting 3 feet away, as if I had already become a problem they were kind enough to tolerate. I reached into my purse and touched my phone. My thumb found the message I had typed before dinner. 2 words. Freeze it. I had not sent it yet. I wanted to hear them say it once more. I wanted to know, without mercy and without doubt, that they believed they had a right to what my husband and I had earned. Then Brandon laughed, tapped the table, and said, "Honestly, her pension just sits there. We're putting it to use." So I sent the text. 5 minutes later, the waiter came back pale, holding Brandon's card like it had burned his fingers. "Sir," he said, "I'm sorry, but this has been declined." Brandon frowned. Melissa stopped smiling. Then his phone lit up on the table. Account frozen. Fraud review initiated. I folded my napkin slowly and looked at my daughter. "You should have asked before spending a dead man's pension." The whole table went silent. But the card was not what ruined their dinner. The real damage walked through the front door 30 seconds later, wearing a navy suit and carrying a black folder with my name on it. The man in the navy suit was not a stranger. His name was David Morrison, and he had handled Richard's estate 9 years earlier when I was too numb to understand why the world kept moving after my husband stopped breathing. David did not come to restaurants for dramatic entrances. He did not enjoy scenes. He was a quiet estate attorney with silver hair, careful eyes, and the kind of voice that made people sit straighter without knowing why. That was why I had asked him to come. Not to embarrass Melissa. Not to punish Brandon. To make sure that when they tried to tell everyone I was confused, there would be one person in that room who knew I was not. But to understand why I let it happen in public, you have to understand what that pension meant before my daughter and her husband turned it into their private account. Richard and I had lived in the same little Cape Cod house in West Hartford for 42 years. He was a union electrician who smelled like sawdust, copper, and black coffee. I was a school nurse at an elementary school where the floors always smelled faintly of crayons and disinfectant. We were never rich. Rich people did not clip coupons on Sunday morning or argue over whether to repair a 12-year-old dishwasher or replace it. We saved slowly. We paid bills on time. We put Melissa through community college first, then helped her finish at Central Connecticut State University when she decided she wanted more. Richard used to say, "A dollar earned honestly ought to be treated with respect." I used to roll my eyes because he said it every time he folded cash into his wallet, but after he died, I heard that sentence everywhere. I heard it when the pension deposit arrived on the first of each month. I heard it when I paid the property tax. I heard it when I bought my blood pressure medicine and chose the generic brand, even though the label was harder to read. My pension was not just money. It was proof that I had not become helpless. It was proof that after widowhood, after the empty chair at breakfast, after the winter nights when the furnace clicked on and I still expected Richard to complain about the heating bill, I could stand on my own 2 feet. Melissa knew that. At least I thought she did. She was my only child, my bright girl with scraped knees and fierce opinions, the little girl who used to fall asleep against my shoulder during snowstorms while Richard shoveled the front walk. I kept every handmade Mother's Day card she ever gave me in a blue tin box under my bed. For years, I believed love meant remembering the child she had been, even when the woman she became started speaking to me like I was a chore on her calendar. After Richard passed, Melissa visited more often at first. She brought casseroles. She organized drawers. She told me I should not have to worry about practical things. "Let me help, Mom," she said. "That is what family does." And because grief makes even smart women tired, I believed her. The first document Melissa asked me to sign came 3 months after Richard's funeral. I remember because the maple tree in our front yard had just started turning red, and I was still wearing Richard's old cardigan around the house, even though the sleeves hung past my hands. Melissa came over on a Saturday morning with 2 coffees, a blueberry muffin, and a folder tucked under her arm. Brandon waited in the driveway with the engine running, scrolling on his phone like my grief was taking too long. "It is nothing serious," Melissa said, setting the coffee on my kitchen table. "Just online banking access, so I can help you pay bills if you ever need me to." I looked at the papers. The words were small. My eyes were tired. She sat beside me, close enough that her perfume covered the smell of the coffee. "Mom, you trust me, right?" That was the wrong question to ask a mother. Of course I trusted her. I had held her through ear infections, spelling tests, heartbreaks, and every disappointment she thought would end her world. I had sold my wedding bracelet once to cover her tuition balance after she missed a financial aid deadline and cried in my living room until she could barely speak. I had watched Sophie for 6 years without charging a penny, picking her up from school, making macaroni and cheese, sewing costumes for school plays, and telling myself that helping my daughter was not the same thing as being used. So I signed. Not because I was careless, because I was lonely, because I wanted to believe Melissa still came over because she loved me, not because there was something in my house she needed. For a while, the help looked harmless. She paid the gas bill online. She set up automatic payments for the water company. She showed me how to check my balance on my phone, then laughed softly when I pressed the wrong button. "It is okay, Mom," she said. "Technology is not your generation's thing." I smiled because I did not want to seem difficult. That is how it starts. Not with a theft you can point to, with a sentence that makes you feel small. Then another. Then another. By Christmas, Melissa had my passwords written in a notebook she kept in her purse. By February, Brandon knew what day my pension landed. By March, they stopped asking before they moved money. I did not know that yet. I only knew that Melissa had begun using a new tone, the one people use when they have already decided you are a problem. She would say, "Mom, did you forget again?" Or, "We discussed this already," even when I knew we had not. The first time I saw a charge I did not recognize, I stared at the screen for almost a full minute. It was only $73.18 at a restaurant in Glastonbury. I had not been to Glastonbury in 2 years. I called Melissa. She sighed before I finished the question. "Mom, that was lunch with Sophie, remember? You offered." I wanted to say no. I wanted to say I remembered every lunch I paid for because I lived on a budget and wrote things down. But her voice had that patient sadness in it, like she was speaking to someone slipping away. So I apologized. That apology cost me more than $73. It taught her I could be made to doubt myself. By the beginning of spring, I had started keeping a red notebook in the drawer beside my bed. I did not tell Melissa. I did not tell Brandon. I did not even tell Sophie, though sometimes I caught my granddaughter watching me with careful eyes, as if she knew something in the house had shifted. Every morning after breakfast, I sat at my kitchen table with my reading glasses low on my nose, opened my banking app, and wrote down every charge I did not understand. $48.90 at a wine shop in New Haven, $112 at a salon in Farmington, $364 at a furniture store near West Hartford Center. Then came the bigger ones. $600 toward a credit card I did not own. $850 marked as an emergency transfer. A car insurance payment with Brandon's name attached to the confirmation email. I stared at that one for a long time. Brandon drove a black Lexus he liked to park across my driveway when they visited, even though there was space on the street. Richard would have noticed that. Richard noticed everything. I could almost hear him saying, "Ellie, a man who takes up too much room on purpose is telling you who he is." I wanted to call Melissa that minute. My hand actually reached for the phone. Then I stopped, because I already knew what she would say. She would soften her voice. She would call me Mom 3 times in one sentence. She would tell me we had talked about it, that I had offered, that grief made time blurry, that maybe my blood pressure medicine was affecting my memory. She had been practicing that language for months. The language of concern. The language that sounds kind in front of other people and cruel when you are alone with it. A week later, I found out she had told Sophie not to ask me for rides anymore. Grandma gets confused with directions, she had said. Sophie told me by accident while we were folding towels in my laundry room. She looked embarrassed the second the words left her mouth. I smiled at her because she was 16 and did not deserve to carry adult shame. But after she left, I stood in front of the dryer with a towel in my hands and felt something cold settle inside me. They were not just taking my money. They were building a case against me. A confused old woman. A forgetful widow. A mother who needed managing. That was the story they wanted ready before I ever objected. So, I changed my habits. I stopped asking questions over the phone. I stopped reacting when Melissa corrected me. I stopped handing her my mail before I opened it myself. Every envelope went into a folder. Every receipt went into the red notebook. Every suspicious charge got circled twice. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, I opened my mailbox and found a notice from the bank thanking me for requesting electronic-only statements. I had made no such request. My paper statements had always come to the house because I liked holding proof in my hands. I read the notice once. Then again. At the bottom was a line saying future account communications would be sent to the primary email on file. It was not my email. It was Melissa's. That was the day the hurt became something cleaner. Not less painful. Just clearer. I carried the letter into my bedroom and opened the top drawer of Richard's old dresser. Inside was his brown leather wallet, cracked along the fold, still holding the faint shape of the life he had carried in it. Behind his expired Union card was the little note he had written for me before his surgery years ago. For Ellie. For peace. For dignity. I held that note between my fingers and finally understood what he had been trying to leave me. Not just money. Permission. Permission to protect myself from anyone, even our own daughter. The next evening, Melissa came over without calling first. She used the key I had given her after Richard died, the one I used to think meant safety. I was in the laundry room folding sheets when I heard the front door open, then the familiar click of her heels across my hardwood floor. She called out, "Mom," in that bright voice she used when she wanted the house itself to believe her. I did not answer right away. I stood still with a fitted sheet in my hands and listened. She did not go to the kitchen. She did not go to the living room. Her footsteps went straight down the hallway toward my bedroom. There are sounds a mother knows. The pull of an old dresser drawer. The soft scrape of wood that sticks in damp weather. The pause when someone is looking for something they do not want to admit they need. I walked to the hallway and stopped just outside my bedroom door. Melissa had her back to me. My top drawer was open. Richard's wallet was in her hand. For 1 second, she looked like the child she used to be when I caught her sneaking cookies before dinner. Then her face changed. It closed. "What are you doing?" I asked. My voice was calm enough to surprise both of us. She smiled too quickly. I was looking for your insurance card. Brandon said you mentioned needing a refill, and I thought I would help. My insurance card had been in my purse for 20 years. She knew that. I looked at the wallet. That belonged to your father. Her fingers tightened around it before she set it back in the drawer. Mom, it is just an old wallet. Just an old wallet. 42 years of his hands opening it at gas stations, hardware stores, school fundraisers, and diners where he always tipped 20% because he said working people should respect working people. Just an old wallet. I stepped into the room and closed the drawer myself. Melissa watched me do it, and for the first time, I saw irritation before she could cover it. Not worry. Not love. Irritation. You have been acting strange lately, she said. Secretive. Defensive. It is not like you. I almost laughed. Instead, I smoothed the front of my sweater. I have been keeping better records. Her eyes moved to my nightstand. She saw the red notebook before I could shift my body. It was only a glance, but it told me everything. She knew what that notebook meant. Records of what? She asked. I said, my money. The room went quiet. Outside, a car passed slowly, tires whispering against the wet street. Melissa folded her arms. Your money pays for things you agreed to help with. There it was. Not confusion. Not denial. Ownership. I said nothing. She took one step closer, lowering her voice. You cannot suddenly act like Brandon and I are stealing from you because you forgot what you promised. That is not fair. Fair. I thought about the car insurance, the salon, the credit card. The email changed without asking me. I thought about the way she had told my granddaughter I could not be trusted to drive across town. Did I promise to change my bank statements to your email? I asked. The color left her face for half a second. Then she recovered. I did that because paper statements are unsafe. Anyone can steal mail. So, you protected me by hiding my own statements from me? She looked toward the hallway, as if checking whether anyone else was there to witness the sentence. That small movement hurt more than I expected. She was not ashamed of what she had done. She was only afraid of who might hear it. Then my phone rang from the kitchen. Melissa flinched. I walked past her to answer it. The screen showed a name I had known for more than 2 decades. Thomas Caldwell, my bank manager. I put the phone to my ear, and before I could say hello, he said, Mrs. Whitaker, I am sorry to call after hours, but there is an urgent transfer request on your pension account, and I do not believe you authorized it. I looked down the hallway at my daughter standing in my bedroom doorway beside Richard's dresser. She knew. I knew. And for the first time, I let her see that I was no longer confused. Thomas Caldwell's voice was steady, but I had known him long enough to hear what he was not saying. Bank managers do not call after hours unless something is badly wrong. I kept my eyes on Melissa while he explained that a transfer request had been submitted less than 20 minutes earlier, moving a large portion of my pension account into a new joint checking account with Melissa listed as an authorized user and Brandon listed as a secondary contact. The amount was $9,400. Not enough to empty me. Enough to test whether I would notice. Enough to see if the door was open. I asked Thomas to repeat the details, and I watched Melissa's expression shift from shock to calculation. She mouthed, "Do not." I turned away from her and said, "I did not authorize that transfer." Thomas exhaled softly. "That is what I thought. I flagged it before processing because the request came through a device I do not associate with you." I asked him, "Whose device?" He hesitated. "The location appears to be near Farmington." Melissa lived in Farmington. I felt no surprise. That was the strangest part. The pain had been arriving in pieces for months, and by the time the truth stood in front of me, it looked familiar. Thomas told me to come to the branch first thing in the morning with identification, any records I had, and no one else. Especially no one else. I thanked him and ended the call. When I turned around, Melissa had stepped into the kitchen doorway. Her face had softened again. She had put on the daughter mask. "Mom," she said, "before you make this into something ugly, you need to listen." I set my phone on the counter. I listened for months. Brandon was going to pay it back. Then Brandon should have asked. She pressed her lips together. You are being dramatic. There it was. The word women hear when they finally object to being mistreated.
Dramatic.
I walked past her, went to the front door, and opened it. She stared at me as if the house had betrayed her too. Are you kicking me out? She asked. I said, I am taking back my key. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she reached into her purse and dropped the key into my palm with a sharp little clink. It was not an apology. It was a warning. The next morning, I wore Richard's favorite blue scarf and drove myself to the bank on North Main Street. My hands did not shake on the steering wheel. Not once. I parked near the entrance, carried my red notebook, 3 folders of statements, the bank notice with Melissa's email, and Richard's old leather wallet in my purse because I needed him with me in whatever way I could have him. Thomas met me at the glass door before the branch officially opened. He had known me since Melissa was in high school. He had seen Richard deposit overtime checks. He had seen me cry quietly at his desk after the funeral while changing account titles. He did not treat me like a confused old woman. He treated me like a customer whose money mattered. In his office, he spread the records across the desk. The truth looked worse in black ink. Online access from Melissa's laptop. Password reset requests. Automatic payments to Brandon's credit card. A debit card I had never received. A pending address change. A pending email change already completed. And the joint account request that would have made it harder for me to prove what was mine. Thomas turned his monitor toward me and said, Mrs. Whitaker, this pattern is consistent with financial exploitation. I looked at the screen. I looked at the dates. I looked at the charges I had circled in red before anyone believed me. What do we do? I asked. He folded his hands. We freeze access, open a fraud review, revoke all outside permissions, and refer this to your attorney immediately. I nodded. Do it.
He paused.
Once I do, they will know. I thought of Melissa in my bedroom, her hand on Richard's wallet, calling it just an old thing. I thought of Brandon laughing over steak and wine he expected me to cover. I thought of Sophie being told her grandmother was confused.
Good, I said.
Let them know exactly when dinner is served. That Friday evening, I chose the gray dress Richard always said made me look like I was about to win an argument. I had not worn it since his memorial luncheon. It still fit, though a little looser around the shoulders, and when I fastened my small pearl earrings in the bathroom mirror, I looked less like the woman Melissa had been describing and more like the woman I had forgotten was still there. The dinner had been my idea. That was the part Melissa never understood. After the bank meeting, I called her and said my voice had been sharp the night before, and perhaps we should sit down somewhere neutral. I did not apologize. I simply offered enough softness for her to hear what she wanted. She accepted within minutes. Brandon picked the restaurant, of course. A polished place in downtown Hartford with valet parking, low lighting, and menus without dollar signs. The kind of place where people pay too much to feel important for 2 hours. Melissa texted me that they were bringing their friends, Paul and Denise, because it would be good for everyone to keep things calm. I knew what that meant. Witnesses. People who would see me as unstable if I raised my voice. People Melissa could perform for. So I brought witnesses too. Mine simply knew how to wait. Before I left the house, I placed my red notebook in my purse, along with copies of the fraudulent transfer request, the changed email notice, and Thomas Caldwell's direct number written on a card. Then I opened Richard's dresser and touched his wallet one more time. I am not begging tonight, I whispered. At the restaurant, Melissa stood when she saw me, smiling too brightly. She kissed my cheek and said, Mom, I am so glad you are being reasonable. Brandon did not stand. He only lifted his glass and said, There she is. Sophie was not there. Thank goodness. Melissa had said she had homework, but I suspected my granddaughter had simply refused to attend another dinner where adults pretended cruelty was concern. I sat at the end of the table, where I could see everyone's hands. Melissa kept touching Brandon's sleeve. Brandon kept checking his phone. Their friends made polite conversation about vacation homes, interest rates, and how difficult it was to find good help these days. No one asked me a single question about myself. That made it easier. They ordered freely. crab cakes, ribeye,
sea bass.
2 bottles of wine, though I drank only water. When the waiter asked if we wanted dessert, Brandon waved his hand and said, "Bring a few. We will share." Then he leaned back and gave Paul the smile I had grown to dislike. Honestly, this is the least stressful part of the week. Family finances are exhausting when someone refuses to understand how money works. Melissa laughed under her breath. Denise looked at me with pity already prepared. I folded my hands in my lap. Brandon continued, encouraged by his own voice. The truth is, Eleanor has money just sitting there every month. Pension deposits, survivor benefits, all of it. We are the ones making sure it actually gets used for the family. I looked at Melissa.
She did not stop him.
She did not look ashamed. She looked relieved that he had said it out loud instead of her. That was the moment I had been waiting for. Not because I needed revenge, because I needed certainty. I reached into my purse, opened the message to Thomas Caldwell, and pressed send.
Now.
For the next 4 minutes, nothing happened. The waiter poured coffee. Brandon told a story about a client in Greenwich. Melissa adjusted her bracelet, the same gold bracelet my pension had bought without my consent. Then the check arrived in a black leather folder. Brandon slid his card inside without looking. The waiter disappeared. Melissa smiled at me like the evening had proved her right. Then the waiter returned, his face carefully blank. "Sir, I am sorry," he said. "This card was declined." Brandon's smile froze. He handed over another card. 30 seconds later, his phone began lighting up. One alert, then another, then another. His mouth opened slightly as he read the words on the screen. Fraud review initiated. External access revoked. Account frozen. Melissa whispered, "Brandon, what is happening?" I picked up my glass of water and took one calm sip. Then I said, "What should have happened the first time you spent my money and called it love?" Melissa's face changed before anyone else understood what had happened. The softness disappeared first. Then the careful smile. Then the daughter I had been trying to save for years vanished completely, and a woman I barely recognized stared at me across a table full of expensive plates paid for with money she had not earned. Brandon stood so quickly his chair scraped the floor, loud enough to make people at nearby tables turn their heads. "There has been a mistake," he told the waiter. His voice was too sharp for a man who had been laughing 2 minutes earlier. The waiter held the card folder against his chest and said, "I can try again, sir, but the message says the account is under review." Brandon looked at me then, not confused, accusing. "What did you do?" I opened my purse and took out the red notebook. Melissa leaned toward me, her voice dropping low. "Mom, do not do this here." I looked around the restaurant. The white tablecloth, the half-empty wine glasses, Paul and Denise sitting stiff and silent, no longer sure which version of the story they had been invited to witness. "You spent it here," I said. "So, we will discuss it here." Melissa's eyes filled with tears on command. I had seen that trick since she was 15. Tears before accountability. Tears before truth. "My mother is confused," she told the waiter, then turned slightly so the nearby tables could hear. "She has been having memory issues, and this is a private family matter." I did not raise my voice. I did not have to. I opened the notebook and placed the first statement on the table. March 3rd, $480.16. Brandon's credit card. I did not authorize it. I placed down the second page. March 10th. Salon charge in Farmington. $112. I was at my cardiologist that morning. Another page. March 17th. Request to change my paper statements to Melissa's email address. I did not authorize it. Brandon reached for the papers, but I slid them back under my hand. "Do not touch my records." Those 5 words settled over the table harder than shouting ever could. Melissa whispered, "You are making us look like criminals." I looked at her for a long second.
"No, Melissa.
"I am letting the records describe you." That was when the front door opened, and David Morrison walked in wearing his navy suit with Thomas Caldwell beside him. Thomas did not look at the wine, the check, or Brandon's rejected cards. He looked at me and gave one small nod, the kind a decent man gives when he knows an elderly woman has spent too long being doubted in her own life. David placed a black folder on the table and said, "Mrs. Whitaker has revoked all outside access to her pension account. A fraud review has been opened. Any further contact regarding her finances should go through my office." Paul shifted in his seat. Denise put her napkin down. Brandon's face lost its confidence piece by piece. Melissa stared at David like he had betrayed her by believing me.
"She is my mother," she said.
David answered calmly, "That does not make her pension community property." I took out the final document. The pending transfer request for $9,400. Melissa saw it and stopped breathing for a moment. She knew that paper could not be explained with concern, confusion, or family help. It was dated. It was traced. It was hers. The waiter stood frozen until Thomas quietly handed him his own card and said, "Please settle the restaurant bill separately. Mrs. Whitaker will not be paying for this table." For the first time that night, no one argued. Melissa looked at me, and her voice broke in a way that almost sounded real. "Mom, please. We can fix this." I gathered the papers back into the folder. You did not want to fix it when I was quiet. Then I stood, picked up my purse, and walked past my daughter without touching her shoulder, because a mother can love a child and still stop handing her the knife she uses to cut away your dignity. David drove me home that night because he said my hands had done enough holding for one day. I sat in the passenger seat with my purse in my lap, watching Hartford pass by in quiet streaks of streetlight and storefront glass. I did not cry until we turned onto my street. Not loud tears. Not the kind that ask anyone to comfort you. Just the kind that arrive after your body realizes it no longer has to pretend. My house was dark except for the porch light I had left on. Richard used to tease me for leaving lights on, then turn them off himself, and kiss the top of my head like the small waste of electricity was proof we were still alive together. David walked me to the door and said he would see me at his office Monday morning. I thanked him. Then I went inside alone, locked the door, and placed Melissa's key in the blue tin box where I kept her childhood Mother's Day cards. That was the hardest thing I did all week. Harder than freezing the account. Harder than signing the fraud report. Harder than watching my daughter's face change when the truth finally had witnesses. Because inside that box was the little girl who once wrote, "I love you more than pancakes," in purple crayon. And beside it was the key returned by the woman who had tried to make me doubt my own mind, so she could reach my money more easily. On Monday, David filed the paperwork revoking every authorization Melissa had. Thomas completed the bank investigation and reversed what could be reversed. Not all of it. Some money was gone. Some trust was gone with it. But the account was mine again. My pension deposits were moved into a protected account with alerts that came only to my phone, my email, and David's office. I changed the beneficiaries on my retirement accounts. I updated my will. I did not remove Melissa completely because I wanted revenge. I left her a letter, $1,000, and a copy of every document she had forced me to collect. David asked if I was sure. I said yes. A daughter who treats her mother like a wallet should not inherit the house that wallet protected. Brandon called twice. I did not answer. Melissa called 37 times in 3 days. Her messages changed as the hours passed. First anger, then tears, then blame, then the soft voice again, the one that used to work. "Mom, please, we are family." I listened to that message once while standing in my kitchen with Richard's wallet on the table. Then I deleted it. Family is not a word you use after you empty someone. Family is what you prove before you are caught. The surprise came that Sunday. Sophie knocked on my door just after noon, holding a brown paper bag from the bakery near the town green. She looked nervous, tall and young, and too old for the things adults had made her see. "Grandma," she said. "I did not come for money." I almost smiled. "I know, sweetheart." She stepped inside and hugged me for a long time. No questions.
No excuses.
Just her arms around me in the hallway where Melissa used to run in with muddy shoes and a school backpack twice her size. Sophie had brought apple turnovers because she remembered Richard liked them. We warmed them in the oven and ate at the kitchen table with paper napkins. She told me she was sorry for believing her mother, when Melissa said I was confused. I told her she was a child, and children are supposed to trust their parents. Then I said something I wish someone had told me sooner. But when you grow up, Sophie, pay attention to who benefits from making you feel small. Months have passed since that dinner. My house is quieter now, but it is honest quiet. The paper statements come to my mailbox again. My pension arrives on the 1st of every month, and when I see the deposit, I no longer feel fear. I feel Richard's hand in mine. I feel 38 years of work. I feel every lunch I packed, every hallway I walked, every child I cared for, every bill I paid when no one clapped for me. Melissa is still my daughter. That truth did not disappear. But another truth stands beside it now. Being a mother does not mean surrendering your name, your memory, your savings, or your dignity. I did not freeze that account to punish my daughter. I froze it because I finally understood what Richard had left me in that old wallet. Peace is not given back by people who take from you. Dignity is not restored by people who call your pain dramatic. Sometimes you have to sign the forms, close the access, stand up from the table, and walk home with what is still yours. I was their mother. I was